Hello everyone, this is Suroj here. Welcome you all to my channel. Today I will show you how to create a Lambda function that will create a SQS queue and send a message to that newly created queue. And the Lambda function will be triggered with a S3 event. Whenever any object is getting uploaded in a specific S3 bucket, the Lambda function will be triggered automatically. Fine. If you see here, whenever any object is pushed into one S3 bucket, the Lambda function is getting triggered and it is creating one SQS queue and is sending a message to that newly created queue. Fine. Now we will implement the same infrastructure in AWS console. Let's go to the AWS console. See, I am in Lambda function dashboard. Fine. I will click on create function, author from scratch, and we'll name this function as SQS Lambda. Runtime is Node.js. Okay, that is fine. We'll click on this change default execution rule. The default one is create a new role with basic Lambda permission. Fine. So what is basic Lambda permission? It will upload the logs into CloudWatch logs. Fine. Okay, let it be as it is. We'll click on create function. Now see, our Lambda function is created and it is ready. We'll click on OK, index.js. Okay, if you see here, few lines of codes are written here by default with this Lambda function. What we will do, we will remove this code and we will paste our customized code that will create one SQS queue and will send message to that newly created queue. Fine. So the code is here in my GitHub repository. I will copy this code and will paste it here in this Lambda function. Fine. We'll click on deploy. Okay, now see, it is successfully updated. So before running the Lambda function, I will go line by line what the Lambda function is doing. Fine. So here in this line we are importing AWS-SDK. This is the syntax. In the next line we are setting the region in which region resources will be created. That is AP South 1 here we have mentioned. In the next line we are mentioning which API version we are using for this code, and we are creating one SQS object. See, creating SQS object and mentioning API version used here. Fine. So here if you see, this is the handler function. It is getting started from here, and this is not an asynchronous function. This is a synchronous function, and three inputs are there for this handler function: event, context, and callback. Fine. And here we are creating one variable named param. Within this param we are mentioning the queue name. What is the queue name? Queue name is demo queue. And now we are calling a function create queue. See here, if there is any error, it will show like error while creating the queue. Fine. Else, if there is no error, then what it will do? It will create one SQS queue. So it will come to else part, and in the else part, see, we have created another variable param and we have defined message attributes. So title we have mentioned, author we have mentioned, and we are writing message body here. See, and we are mentioning the queue URL which has been created with this create queue function. Okay, now we are calling send message function. Fine. While there is any error, it will show error while sending message. And if the message has been sent successfully to that newly created queue, it will show success and then message ID. Fine. And at the end of the handler function, it will return success message. Fine. Okay, now what we will do, we will click on test. We'll create one event named test, and we are not passing any input to this function, and we'll click on save. Okay, now we'll click on test. See here, the response is success. That means the callback function is returning success message to us, but we are getting some error. What is the error? Error while creating queue, access denied error. Why access denied error? Because the role for the Lambda function has been created by default. Fine, we have not created that. What is mentioned in that role? In that role, the basic Lambda function is there. What is basic Lambda function? It can push logs to CloudWatch logs. That's it. It can't create any object, or it can't create any AWS resources, or can't push any message to that resource like that. Fine. That means we need to update the Lambda function execution role in IAM. Fine. So I'll click on configuration, we'll click on permissions, we'll click on the role. See here, this is the role and this is the permission. AWS Lambda basic execution role is attached. We'll click on add permission, attach policies, and we'll search for SQS. Enter. Amazon SQS full access. I'll click on this so that it can do anything with SQS. See, it is now attached. We'll click on Lambda, click on code, and again I will run the Lambda function. See, the response is success. And if you see info, the output is success, and then something is written. Fine. So what is this? This is the message ID. The message ID for the message which has been sent to the newly created SQS queue. Let me go to the SQS, click on refresh. See, demo queue has been created just now and one message is available. Fine. Let me click on the queue, send and receive messages, poll for messages. See, one message we have received. Let me click on the message. If you see the message body, this is sending first message to this new demo queue. Fine. Let me go to the code, index.js. See, this is the message body sending first message to this new demo queue. Fine. And what is the attribute? Title is hello world and author is Suroj Bera. Fine. Let me check that also. Attributes, author string Suroj Bera, title that is also string hello world. Fine. So that means the SQS queue is getting created and one message is getting sent to that SQS queue using one Lambda function. But here what we are doing, we are triggering the Lambda function manually. Whenever we are clicking on the test button or we are running the Lambda function, that time only the SQS queue is getting created and message is getting sent to that queue. Now the same thing will be automated using S3 event. Fine. So what we will do, we will delete this SQS queue, demo queue. Let me delete this. We'll type delete. Fine. Okay, let me refresh. No queue is there. Fine. Okay, now what we will do, we will create one S3 bucket in the same region, in Mumbai region. Let me click on S3 management console. Let me click on create bucket. I will name this as Suroj Bera. Today's date is 3rd of October 310. Fine, Suroj Bera 310. So AWS region is AP South 1. Okay, that is fine. We'll create bucket. Okay, fine. So it is created now. Now what I will do, I will go to Lambda function and we'll click on add trigger here. See, we'll click on add trigger button here. So select a source. The source will be S3 bucket. I will search for the bucket, that is Suroj Bera 310. Fine. And all object create event. So event type, see, select the event that you want to have trigger the Lambda function. You can optionally set up a prefix or suffix for an event. We are not going for this. All object event created. Whenever any object will be created within that S3 bucket, that time the Lambda function will be triggered. Okay, let it be like this. And I acknowledge that using same S3 bucket for both input and output is not recommended. Okay, and we'll click on add. See here, the trigger has now been added. We'll click on code. Now I'll go to S3 and we'll go to that bucket, and now I will upload one file. Add file, desktop, AWS, start server, open, and let me upload this file. Okay, fine. Now it has been uploaded. So logically our Lambda function should get triggered. Fine. So let me check whether it has been triggered or not. So if you see here, we can't see that it has been triggered or not. So how we can check that? If the Lambda function has been triggered, then the SQS queue should have been created and one message should have been sent to that SQS queue. Let me go to the SQS queue tab then. Let me refresh. See, the queue has been created. Fine. So let me click on this, send and receive messages, poll for messages. See, same message body. If we see the attributes, same attributes. Where we can check that whether the Lambda function has been triggered or not when the SQS event has been created. So for that we need to go to CloudWatch. Fine. So whenever the Lambda function is getting triggered through an event, so that time we can't see the execution result here. Fine. So we need to check the logs from the CloudWatch, and whenever we are triggering the Lambda function from this console, we are clicking on test to run the Lambda function. That time execution result tab will be there and we can see the success or error message from here. Fine. So to go to CloudWatch, let me click on monitor, and here we can see view logs in CloudWatch. See here, this is the log stream. I will click on this. So this is the oldest one and this one is the latest one. Fine. Let me click on this. See, this is the success. This is the message ID D00B77E3. Let me check this. D00B77E3. Fine. That means the message ID is matching with this. So first time, if you see, this is the start request, this is the end request. Fine. So first time when we have triggered the Lambda function, error while creating queue access denied. So that time we got the access denied error. Fine. So here it is ending the request. Fine. And report request ID. Fine. So after updating the Lambda execution role, again we have triggered from the Lambda console. Fine. So that time we have the start request ID, end request ID, report request ID, and this was the message body, or you can say the logs for that Lambda function. Let me click on this. See, that time message was sent to that SQS queue, newly created SQS queue, and this was the message ID. See, now the last time, so from here the Lambda function has been started and it got triggered from S3 event. See here, this is the log. If you see, so success and then message ID, and the message ID is matching with the SQS queue message. Fine. So now you got some idea about how to create a Lambda function, to create one SQS queue and to send a message to the SQS queue, and how the trigger works for this Lambda function. That means how the trigger automatically triggers the Lambda function whenever any event gets created. Fine. So that's it for now today. We'll see you in the next video, and if you really like this video, kindly like, share, comment and subscribe. Bye bye.